Greetings, welcome to the Transforming Assessment webinar series. We are now already in June, gosh, time flies. Today's session is on generative AI in assessment with a focus on deep fakes and synthetic media. And our speakers today are Jasper Rowe and Mike Perkins. So Jasper, I believe you want to begin, please.
Thanks very much. I will just switch my camera on quickly. Say hello, everyone. I'm going to keep my camera off actually during this time, but just so you can put a face to the name. So hi, and now I hand over to Mike.
Hi everyone, I'm joining you from very sunny Athens today. I'm Mike Perkins from the British University of Vietnam. I'm the head of the Centre for Research and Innovation, and today we're going to be presenting some work that I've been exploring for a while in terms of our series of generative AI and assessment. And this session today, as Matthew has been talking about, we'll be talking about the issues related to deepfakes and synthetic media in relation to education and specifically in assessment. And I believe Jasper.
I think Mike dropped off there, but I think we'll just crack on. We'll get started.
Sorry.
There you go. You're back.
Yeah, Mike, your connection is really slow. It's showing up red on the control panel sometimes. So I guess if it happens during your section, Jasper can take over at that point. So just be aware of it.
Sure, no problem.
All right, thanks.
Okay, so I think we'll get started then, shall we? So let's get going. Today we're going to be talking about deepfakes and assessment. So I just want to ask, have all of you heard deepfakes? Is everyone aware what we mean when we say deepfakes? So maybe you can put it into the chat if you're familiar, if you know what it is, or if you're still thinking, you know, what is a deepfake? Okay, great. Yeah, some people responding. It's been in the news a lot lately. In fact, the last couple of days, there have been a few different news stories about deepfakes. Did anyone see them? Okay, excellent. Someone says that they want detail. Well, there's definitely going to be detail, so that's good. So in the news recently, there have been cases. One was that ChatGPT's new model, GPT-4 Omni, had a voice that was exceptionally similar to Scarlett Johansson. Scarlett Johansson has actually instigated some, I think, looking at leading it against the company OpenAI. And then there are a couple of other things. Today, there was just a paper released, which got picked up by The Guardian, about researchers at MIT who are creating deep fakes of yourself, but when you are older, with the intention of giving you advice about your future. So it's almost creating a fake of yourself, but when you're, you know, in a much older age, and then giving advice. So we can see that deepfakes are really picking up speed. Before we talk about what they are, let's look at a quick clip. So this is just a 1-minute clip, and this is an example from a very popular deepfake channel on YouTube, which is of Morgan Freeman. And we all know Morgan Freeman has a lovely, very recognizable voice. So I'll just give you all a minute to watch that.
Folks, if you haven't found it, it's in the text chat. There's a link to a YouTube video in the text chat that you can go and watch the deep fake of Morgan Freeman.
Thanks, Matthew. Forgot to mention that. So I finished watching now. I hope everyone else has. Did you find it convincing? This is actually not Morgan Freeman. This is a deep fake of Morgan Freeman. So he never said these words, and it's not him saying them. Yeah, it's quite creepy, right? It's quite creepy. It's also quite cool, and that's really interesting. I think there is this. Whenever I read about a deep fake, I feel quite mixed about it, because on the one hand, it's very exciting that technology can do this, but on the other hand, you think, wow, what are the applications, right? What are the applications of this? Yeah, and we can see that it's becoming better. It's definitely becoming more sophisticated, but with this one, you can still tell that there's something not quite right. Yeah, so there's a few different ways to tell deep fakes. There have been lots of sort of simple strategies, like looking at the hands, looking at the shoulders, different methods of identifying them, but none of them have been shown to be foolproof. And deepfakes they're a form of generative AI output, right? And obviously, the scary part of deepfakes, the thing that causes us as educators some concern, is that they can portray an individual doing something or saying something that they've never done. And I mentioned that case of Scarlett Johansson, but there have been a few different cases in the media. So OpenAI, for example, released a deep fake of some famous singers, and including the rapper Jay-Z. And Jay-Z, of course, didn't take kindly to this and is also instigating some legal proceedings. So we're going to see more and more of these cases coming up as the technology matures and as the technology progresses. But we are actually, we're not exactly late to the party, but there has been talk about deepfakes going on for a while. And there was a Homeland Security report from the US Department of Homeland Security talking about deepfakes and the risks of them, with this this timeline that I took from their report. And you can access the report online. And it points out there that really, even though the technology might not be completely there yet, it plays on something that's very human and very natural to us, which is believing what we see, right? And to that extent, it doesn't have to be especially sophisticated to be believable, right? And so they can still be used to spread misinformation or disinformation. And you can see a timeline of some famous cases here. Most of the focus so far has basically been on how this could affect political outcomes, right? So propaganda to influence voting, having bad actors meddle in elections with this stuff. And yeah, Andrew's put something really good in the chat, which is that in the UK as well, about 2 weeks ago, and now in one part of Australia, I don't know if that's Australia as a whole, they've taken some legal actions to mitigate the effect of something that is just happening. And that is that we're seeing non-consensual pornography, explicit deepfakes. In the past, this was mainly from celebrities because there's so much information about them online, so many images, so much media. But now we're getting to the point that you only need a limited sample of information about someone to make a deep fake. So if we actually just briefly talk about what deepfakes are, right? Deepfakes first came into being, they first had the name coined in 2017, and it was on this Reddit community. And the Reddit community got very famous and quite notable for producing deepfakes at that time. And deepfakes is actually a combination of two terms, right? It's deep learning and fakes. So deep learning and fakes, it's where you use a generative adversarial network, I won't get too deep into the specifics, to create this likeness or this audio that sounds like a targeted person. On the other hand, we also have something called cheap fakes. Cheap fakes, you can think of them as also called shallow fakes, as like a counter to deep. is where you do the same thing. You want to manipulate, you want to portray someone doing something they haven't done, but you do it using kind of old school methods. So there was one very famous example of a video of Nancy Pelosi, and that was spread online, and it was made to make her sound like she had been drinking with slurred, unconfident speech. And people thought that that was a deep fake, but actually that was not. It was just a slowed down video. So cheap fakes are also something to be aware of. But in our opinion, or speaking for Mike, I mean, it's definitely my opinion, these are less of a concern because the technology for deep fakes is really picking up speed, and they're becoming easier, quicker to produce, and they're becoming just way more accessible, essentially. And so coming on to this, I don't know if any of you have seen this, but there was a tool that Microsoft was talking about called VASA 1. VASA 1 is not being released to the public. They've said it's too dangerous at the moment to release to the public. But it can essentially create a deepfake from a single image and an audio clip. Mike has just put a very short link to show you VASA 1 in the comments. So I'll give you all 1 minute to look at that. But this is where it starts to get really scary, because you can see this is something of a leap forward from the Morgan Freeman clip, and it can be done using just a single image and an audio clip. Okay, so I'll just give you 1 minute quickly to take a look at that. Yeah, so I hope that that's suitably scary. It's definitely scary for me. And that really shows, yeah, it's very impressive. It's very impressive. And I think this is really a key point, that now this is becoming more accessible. This tool is not getting released because I think Microsoft quite rightly realizes that it's just too risky at the moment. But who's to say that it won't be developed and released? The technology is there. These things have a way of getting out one way or another. So if you ask me, it's going to start becoming more prevalent. And if we quickly turn to education, there have been cases. There was one case in the US in April where there was a disgruntled teacher who created a deepfake of a principal's voice. And essentially the deepfake was, depicting the principal as though they were discriminatory, as though they were racist. And that shows that, this does have ramifications for education. I don't think that we're being too cautious or investigating something that isn't going to be there. It's going to come. And it's time to start thinking about that sooner rather than later. Okay, so that's a little introduction to deepfakes. Now I'm going to hand over to Mike to continue.
Thanks, Jasper. So what I'd like to talk about now is whether there's some potential benefits here. We've been seeing the scary things, and Jasper's been showing you the real key risks, which, as people have been mentioning in the chat, very clear to see some huge risks to general authenticity and the reputational damages of individuals and institutions. but could there be some benefits? Now, we've seen some other cases in the news where this one was quite a funny one for me, where the Ukraine announced they had a deep fake foreign ministry spokesperson. And this is really one of the key areas we've been exploring in terms of, can deepfakes be used for more inclusivity? If you have people who want to be able to get their ideas out there, their words out there, but aren't necessarily confident in their own video or in their own speech patterns, then having a deepfake may be an alternative approach to letting people see some video that is clearly, fake generated, but is not done in a deceptive way. And this is one of the potential benefits for education. The second image we have there below is the deepfake Salvador Dali. So you go to the Salvador Dali Museum and you can have a deepfake selfie with Salvador Dali. So as well as maybe some educational benefits, there's also some entertainment benefits. Having deepfakes with individuals from, let's say, historical figures and being able to have discussions based upon their work. It's not a big stretch to say, well, what if you create a custom GPT using the readily available software now, and we train a GPT on the past works of an author, maybe a philosopher, and then create a deepfake video of that philosopher, and you can have these discussions. And maybe this is an option for students. Go and talk to this philosopher and explain their ideas as they apply in the modern setting. But what about in the classroom? Is this something that you would maybe do? Would you deepfake yourself for a lecture? I'm sure some of you straight away think, oh my God, not having to turn up to a lecture would be amazing. I can just do the deepfake. And this is one of the potential benefits that we see for maybe asynchronous education. So being able to be a little bit clearer, being able to be a bit crisper without errors in your speech. I know certainly that when it came to recording videos during COVID online teaching, I was asked to record videos that I knew students would be watching for 6 months, a year, and just that thought of yourself, well, what if I make a mistake in this talk? Do I have to delete the whole thing and start again? What if people laugh at me? What's going to be the case here? Now, if you can use a deepfake of yourself, but you can give yourself a bit more of a confident tone, you can explain what's going to happen, then you can be a little bit more confident in the resulting elements of your video. And I think, Jasper, you had this issue with a colleague in JCU, right?
This wasn't a colleague in JCU, but someone I know, yeah, they were asked to produce something like 20 hours at a different university here in Singapore of themselves giving a lecture. And they said, I think that the request got denied, but they asked, well, can I just do a deepfake of myself? I mean, I've got all the things that I want to say. I could type it up as a script and have my avatar give the lectures. It's going to save me hours of work.
Yeah, exactly. And then that request, no, you cannot. You've got to do that yourself. So this is still something that we're catching up to. And I think it's probably right that educational leaders should be cautious of this. It's not to say that there aren't benefits here. It's clear that there are some potential benefits. When we look at the normalization of deepfakes, this maybe starts to blur the lines in terms of ethics. When we start to say, well, what is acceptable use of deepfake technology and what's not acceptable use? So this is where we really start to see some potential concerns. What I'd like to do now is to explain a little bit about what BUV, my institution, we're actually using deepfakes in the classroom. So if I just move on to our AI assistant from BUV. So within BUV, what we've actually created is using the HeyGen platform, and we're going to be sharing a link to a HeyGen video later on today. We actually have an opportunity for students to gain some additional insight about their assessments in a video format. So we have now a set template where faculty members input information about their assessment into a Word document, and then these are processed centrally and uploaded into a standardized format where we have Geoff, our BUV AI video assistant, take students through the assessment practices and what's expected. Now, this is all information that is being created by the faculty member, but then it's being portrayed by somebody else. One of the reasons that we decided to do this is so that students can get alternative perspectives on their assessment strategies, but making sure the content is actually the same. Maybe you had experiences where you'll tell students something 1,000 times and they'll still ignore what you say, but then their friend says it to them, and then that's the case of them being able to actually remember it. So this is what we're trialing out in this next semester at BUV, where every single assessment that we release will have an associated to be assessed, what the challenges are, what they need to be focusing on, but this is all done through our Geoff BUV AI video assistant. Now, it's also important here to clarify some terms. Although we do refer to this idea of deepfakes, deepfakes are only when we're replicating an act to produce lifelike images and video. We can refer to this more broadly as synthetic media. So Geoff, our BUV AI video assistant, this is a kind of a standardized platform that has been used. Obviously, it's been based on real people, but we're not trying to replicate anybody quite yet. We're not at the stage where we want every individual faculty member to have their own deepfake, although this might be the future option. But what we're trying to do is to use a synthetic video assistant to try and say, this is our neutral personality explaining what is required from students. So that's how we're exploring this within BUV. But then we need to think about what would be the next steps. If we're giving synthetic media and deepfake technology, well, what happens when we actually come to using deepfake tech within the educational assessments themselves? And at this point, I'm going to pass you back over to Jasper, who will explore a little bit more this topic.
Thanks. Yeah, and some really good comments going on in the chat. I just want to get to all of them. I hope we'll have time to discuss some at the end. I mean, yeah, we've got things to consider, like the rights of lecturers. So, you know, just like with extras, there was a case of extras in acting, you know, who get to keep their rights? To the movie studio get the rights to their likeness? That's something that we might even anticipate in education. I'm not saying that we're actors, but that's something to consider. I mean, really, one of the main risks that we can think about in terms of deepfake technology, if it becomes easy to access, the barriers become lower, and suddenly students are able to do this, because remember that students tend to be very tech savvy, you know. Are we going to see a reversal? Because during COVID-19, obviously, remote proctoring, it became such a popular way of dealing with the restrictions that we had to abide by. But we know that even during that time, online proctoring software can be exploited. It's fallible. And the systems don't always work. And as someone who runs exams that use online proctoring software, I won't say which one, you know, they are not easy to use and they are vulnerable. And so if a deepfake can be used, then what happens? Well, you have another person impersonating, right? And they can impersonate very easily using that deepfake. So you say, show me your driving license or show me your ID or whatever, and it's going to match up, even though it's not the correct person. And there's not a whole lot that you can necessarily do about that. So could deepfakes become a logical next step in gaming the system? It might sound far-fetched, but if you consider, if someone had told you in 19, you know, about where ChatGPT would be taking us, we might not have believed it, I guess. But that's the world that we're living in today, where AI can't be detected in text reliably. Maybe next the visual will not be able to be detected reliably. So just a couple of quick examples that I've thought of, right? So one is, for instance, an audio report. Now, I'm not sure how common this mode of assessment is, but I think it's conceivable that if you, especially I know in some clinical practices, you ask for written reports and audio reports. So in this scenario, the student is asked to submit an audio and written file from their supervisor in a clinical placement. But they decide, how about I will use ChatGPT and I will get the letter written in a style that sounds like my supervisor. I can use my emails to train that. And I can easily create a deep fake of their voice. There's a recorded lecture online, right? So that the material is already there, especially if it's just one-dimensional, if it's just a voice. So I really don't think that it's that impossible a scenario. And when I look at things like this AI-generated image that I created to accompany this slide, it does really make you step back and take stock of, oh wow, this is progressing quick. Because you see there's a cyborg recording the audio, and I created this image myself with a natural language prompt. So again, I think it's a likely outcome even. Or we could look at a sort of a lower stakes version. Say that, so I run a module where part of the participation grade is about how often you contribute to the subject site. That includes submitting audio, submitting video, submitting text contributions to an online forum. And that can, in my subject, it doesn't count for it, but in some subjects, that might be the majority of the grade. So what if I want to do some contract cheating? What if I say, I don't really want to do all this work. I don't want to record videos of myself or oral presentations. Let me just hand this over to a company that has the technical expertise. I'll upload a picture of myself. I'll give them a couple of minutes of my speaking, and they'll just do it for me. And that would be extremely straightforward. If it's a company that does this a lot, it would be extremely straightforward to do. And then where are we as educators? If we can't trust the visual and the audio, does this mean that we're really just restricted back to only in-person oral assessments? Because I think that's quite a scary possibility. So maybe we're going to see a reversal of where COVID took us. And that's something that's also worth considering. There's one other angle that I think is worth thinking about, and that is, could we see students or even external actors who want to be disruptive, who want to impact other students, who have kind of malevolent or malicious intent, spread fake news or fake information? And this could relate to education, it could relate to assessment, but it's not inconceivable to think that a student with bad intentions will create a deep fake of a teacher and say, hey everyone, the exam's moved to tomorrow. Hey everyone, you can complete this assessment later. Or spread some sort of disinformation about assessment practices. So that's a sort of a more abstract way that we could consider this. But I mean, in summary, I think that it does raise serious questions about things like online proctoring and about how long we're really going to be able to trust what we see and what we hear if it's mediated by a computer or by the internet. So that's just a few scenarios. And now I'm going to hand back over to Mike for a minute.
Thanks, Jasper. And I've just put a little annotation on this side before I move over, just as a highlight to recognize when we're thinking about how do we spot deepfakes, how do we spot Gen AI images. As Jasper mentioned, one of these issues is often, hands, lips, shoulders. And if you see here on the slide, which I've annotated, that is a right raise if you look at the angle of the arm, but on the opposite side. So this is something that is often something that is a little bit strange and that we can actually watch out for. So if we're thinking about how we can actually spot these potential deepfakes, maybe we also need to start thinking a little bit more about some of the solutions then. So what could be some of our potential solutions for a deepfake crisis? Apologies, I think if it just lost me there. But let's see what are some of our potential solutions that we can consider. I think we have to be aware of what we can do. Now, we can't really change what our students are necessarily doing, but we have to be there to set good examples, to provide training when it's appropriate, and to ensure that people are aware that what you see and what you hear isn't necessarily always going to be the truth. So there are several different examples which you can actually see online. This website, spotdeepfakes.org. Give it a go at some point. Try and see whether you can spot the deepfakes, because it's not always as easy as you might think. Now, I've been seeing some things come up through the chat. People saying, oh, well, it's just staring at the camera too much, not blinking or not looking away. But if you're ever being recorded, if you have a big video camera in front of your face, one of the things that you're often told is you've got to look at the camera because you've got to have that engagement with the viewers who aren't there. Very different to having a conversation with somebody. It's very normal for eyes to move away and to not be focused directly on the person. But spotting deepfakes is quite a challenge. So we can train faculty and students to simply be critical. We can let people know that these are complex issues, that we have to check and verify information that we see, and it's potentially encouraging students to use additional sources to back up what they're actually saying, rather than just, oh, I saw a video of this online and therefore I'm going to write about it. I think we also have to have some sort of a responsibility within our institutions to have some sort of a policy about this. Now, this is something that many institutions are struggling with. We've already seen this in the case of generative AI in general, and some institutions still don't have a policy on how they deal with Gen AI. So if we're now saying to institutions, oh, well, as well as a Gen AI policy, we've got to have a deepfakes policy. What is it that you are allowing students to do? What is it that you're allowing your educators to do? How should we be using deepfakes within this overall situation? So being proactive here in terms of actually thinking about what we can do in the future is going to have this real impact on how well our students are prepared for the future. And in terms of some specific elements, what about alternatives to remote proctoring? I've been seeing people talk about going back to face for everything, and this is something that many institutions are actually using. Especially when we saw the switch in many G8 universities to move directly to least. Maybe now there's going to be a shift so that actually students who are overseas or who are based in rural communities, maybe this might end up disadvantaging students, because we suddenly say, no, you're not going to have remote proctoring, or no, you can't do your presentation online. You've got to do everything face-to-face. But maybe there's some opportunities to actually encourage students to use deepfakes. This is something that, again, we're looking at exploring. And one of my assessments that I use at the moment asks students to use synthetic media only to create a video. Now, I'm not asking students to create deepfakes of themselves, but I am saying you must create an entirely AI-generated video. So that is using text-to-speech, using tools where we have synthetic media linked to those text-to-speech, and we have other people explaining concepts. What I'm trying to do with my students is get them to think about these challenges. It's not a way for them to slip around presentations, because preparing these videos does take a lot of time. And it can be a real challenge to actually go a little bit deeper into this area and ask students to consider what are the real implications here. Now, as Jasper and I have been talking about this, we can think about some other potential solutions for this crisis. What are we going to do on an institutional basis? We've got to prepare for a clear strategy to try and deal with this disinformation. So as I mentioned, having some sort of a policy, having some sort of a strategy is going to be something that is going to be really, really important for HEIs to consider, as well as schools, because they are really, really at risk. We've also talked about the potential of including what we call a dark site. So a website that we have produced already in case of a crisis related to deepfake. So you can open this up straight away to say, there's been some sort of a crisis, quick edit, and then this is available to external stakeholders. So where can you find out more? Well, we have released recently a preprint on arXiv, and there's a link there on the video, and I'm just going to drop the link to the paper itself into the chat as well. And you can take a little bit of a deeper look into some of these potential risks, into a potential research agenda for the future, and trying to see what we as educators can do in terms of our own responsibility. But what I'd also like to do is to share a little link to a video from me and Jasper have created to promote this preprint. So I'm just dropping a link to HeyGen in the platform. Just bear in mind this, preface this with, this is a deepfake of Jasper and I. So please take a look, 1 minute, and let's see what you think. So take a look at Jasper and I and tell me what you think about our video. Does it sound like us? Does it look like us? What are your thoughts? Okay, so for me, that's now finished. So I hope you enjoyed our little video. Yeah, there are some things there that weren't great about that deepfake. I think the voice for Jasper is fantastic. The voice for me, I've actually got several different voices in there. I've recorded multiple versions, and I use some of them for some elements and some of them for others. I do think it makes me sound a little bit American at times, a little bit Irish at times, and so there are some slight oddities in the speech patterns. The videos with the eyes blinking but not moving, yeah, this is also a case, and the lips aren't always fully synced together. However, that is an example of the lowest level deepfake that platform actually offers. So HeyGen, that is the equivalent of anybody can create that for free, but it just costs credits to actually produce the videos. Now, that same organization has two additional levels of deepfake tools that you can use. One is a fine tuning where it just they spend a little bit more time and use a better model to lip sync that video. And then the third model they use is a studio quality, which requires 5 minutes of studio level footage with a green screen background. And then this is then able to create something that is even more realistic and lifelike. So although that video is a starting point, as Jasper's saying, what's going to be the future? Well, we'd like to leave that up to you. What is going to be the future? How can we progress on into the end? And how can we develop our tools and techniques to help support students and educators to make sure that they're prepared for this? And with that, I'm going to end and say thank you very much. Back over to you, Matthew.
Thanks very much, Mike and Jasper. There's been a lot of definitely chat in the chat. I think this is, I guess, yet another new frontier that we have to deal with in education. They've been coming thick and fast. The pandemic really kicked us in the pants, and then we've got ChatGPT, and then we've got things like this. Personally, I think education is going to be thrown upside down and inside out, and it has to be so if it wants to survive. Whether the current business models that drive, the education system as such, that's a different matter. I think we've got this problem of, please, anybody else comment in the text chat what you think. The challenge is. It's a wicked problem to solve, isn't it? It's classic systems thinking, wicked problem solving that's got so many different factors coming at play. How do we address this with the rapid change in technology? You might, in the pandemic, we thought, let's do remote proctoring, and that, helped a lot of people. And then now we've got deepfakes coming along that puts that solution at threat. Not only have you just, a lot of institutions haven't even got a handle on things like remote proctoring technologies, and now they've got to deal with yet another round of change. So, a lot of people were already tired after the pandemic, and now we've got, 2 more waves of significant change coming through, let alone the political changes and things that are happening in Australia, at least the Accord. Assuming it survives the politics. So there's a lot of things I think that educators and university management and students and governance people need to be across. It will be interesting to see the results of the Texas RFI, and hopefully enough people will get to see this session, because I think this session is certainly a different angle on the generative AI and, maintaining academic integrity side of the equation. People have been thinking about things like ChatGPT, but now if we have things like deepfakes of students presenting, oral assessments via their webcam, that really throws more spanners in the works for many people. So, yeah. Does anybody got questions they would like or comments they would like to make via the microphone? We still have, a good chunk of time. Would love to hear, other people's opinions or perspectives or experience. If you've got it, pop up your virtual hand using the hands up symbol at the bottom center of the screen, and you're welcome to speak.
In the meantime, I would just like to address a few points that people are coming up. Please do raise your hand if you've got anything specifically you'd like to address. But on some of these related issues, I see Brett Cullen, thank you. You've been talking about Turnitin's AI detector. Jasper and I have done quite a lot of work around AI detection, and so there's a little bit of information here in this preprint that we recently released, which tracks the performance of several different AI detection tools when you actually start to introduce differences in the text. So this talks about the use of adversarial techniques, where we say, look, students don't use AI tools in the way that AI detectors test them. AI detectors test by taking direct output from things like ChatGPT and saying, hey, magic, our software actually can track this. But what we show in this recent paper is that if you try and change the output through the tool itself, for example, asking the output be more like a non-native English speaker, or asking for it to be more complex or less complex or with spelling errors, this really reduces the ability of these AI tools to actually detect them. So although the detection tools are getting better, and you will hear Turnitin do talk about improvements in the detection tools, which I don't disagree with, they are getting better, but so are the large language models themselves. They're becoming less detectable, and students are learning to write with them in deeper ways. Jasper and I use what we call the AI assessment scale. Some of you may have seen posted online. This is a way to actually track our use of AI, and we now can encourage students to use AI as a part of a co-writer. So some challenges are definitely remaining with AI text detection. It's not as easy as we think, and whether we'll have a deepfake detector, who knows? I saw somebody earlier did post a very recent paper about deepfake video detection. I'll just re-put that into the chat box, which we can take a look at. But sorry, I did see that we had a question. There was a hand raised up somewhere. So if anyone's got any questions, please do let us know.
Yep, Joe, you got your hand up. If you'd like to turn on the microphone, bottom center of the screen.
Yes, thanks, Matt. My name's Jo Holland. I'm from Western Sydney University. Just in regards to the AI detection tool from Turnitin, we've had a lot of issues specifically with students with disabilities who are not even using any type of tools like Grammarly, because we do understand there is an AI setting in Grammarly where they can switch it off so it's not detected. But it's interesting to acknowledge, at least, students with autism are actually being picked up using that via that detection tool just from their own style of writing, so without using any tools at all. So it's actually becoming quite a big problem, because they then highlighted, for academic integrity. So I'd just like to know if other people have experienced that too, because we're finding about 10% of the detection tools, at least, are incorrect.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's such an important issue. Sorry to jump in if, Mike, you wanted to take it, but I think that's such an important issue that we're really, we're not paying as much attention to the students who are unfairly penalized by these new technologies, which have come out so exceptionally quickly. And I haven't come across any empirical studies that show that it happens for students with autism, but I would love to see one, because it's been known for a while that they unfairly bias English as a second language speakers. And so we do have to be careful about the equity that we potentially sacrifice when we start using these technologies. And I'm not suggesting that these technologies in detection don't have a place, but we shouldn't be using them as the basis for academic integrity decisions or sanctions, and we should be open to alternative explanations as well. We're just wrapping up this study at the moment, which is on attitudes to AI text detection, and some of the results have really left me feeling quite sad, because some students had given very long answers about the struggle that they went through being falsely accused and having to resubmit assignments against deadlines and delaying their finishing their study. Is quite shocking stuff. And so definitely I've had experience. I wonder if anyone else has too.
Yeah, thanks, Jasper. I think it's a really challenging issue that Joe's mentioned, and we do talk a little bit about inclusivity in the paper. We did write this for a specific special issue on inclusive education in the age of Gen AI, and these text detection tools work because they look at what is the normal, or what is the standard way that humans write compared to the standard way that AI tools write. But if you have changes on either of those, if you're asking an AI tool to write in a non-standard way, or you have a human writing in a non-standard way, then this throws detection off in both ways. Suddenly, if you have somebody writing in an alternative style, where because their practices or because any learning disabilities have show them writing in a different way, then you do have these huge risks of challenges in text detection. So it's not something that is really suitable for use when we say we're using this to punish students. But I would just like to flag that I'm not recommending in general that we use detection tools. AI detection tools can be actually a helpful, encouraging to write with AI, but show AI, that's fine, but we don't think you did it in the best way. And so you can show students the reports and say, look, this just all reads too much like AI. For example, the delving, the navigating, the demystifying, as people have been, a way that keeps your voice available as well. A lot of issues there. I think we've got Mike has raised his hand as well.
Yeah, I'm going to put it in the text chat, but I've seen a university in the UK, which I think is very clever, has put on their website that in the future, anytime in the future, it could be 10 years, whatever, they can go back with new technologies, future new technologies, and if they find that somebody's cheated, then they can, cancel your degree. So even though there's a race between improving deepfakes or Gen AI or whatever, the point is that the detection technology in 10 years' time, looking at what you did, 10 years ago, and so that risk, I think it's the risk-reward ratio. And if you can, I think it's quite a clever way to do it. Would you risk the fact that some future technology could detect that you cheated? And I think that would deter a lot of students.
Yeah, I think that is something to really consider, that if you tell students that in the future we may be able to detect this use, but I'd like to throw an alternative approach your way and say, why don't we just students? Jasper and I have been big proponents of work on the AI assessment scale, which we created with Leon Furs, who some of you may be familiar with. And what we're saying here is that this is actually an approach that you can say to students, go ahead, use AI tools, because this is a tool that's now available to you. If we're not changing our assessment strategies to match with technologies, we're the ones who are at fault. It's not the students who are at fault for using the tools, it's us for setting inappropriate assessments. So I think that's something that we really consider how we on that point for Mike. No, maybe not. Okay, that's fine. But yeah, thank you. Of these AI tools, it is something that is going to be very easily avoided. I see Jasper's microphone's coming back on. So Jasper, do you want to go for it?
Oh no, I think that you trailed off at the end there slightly. That's why I was going to jump in, but then you came back, so it's all okay. Yeah, so I think that's a good point. The AIAS. We put a link to that in the chat. Okay, everyone. So I think that's every question answered so far. So I think I'll hand back to Matthew now. Thank you, everyone, for
Sure.
listening. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope it's been useful. I did put a link to my LinkedIn profile, which I use a lot, and so does Mike. So please do chat with us. It will be great to stay connected, and looking forward to the next one of these sessions.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Your links in the text chat, well, they will all appear on our recording page. So if folks have missed them, this is going to be online, as I will put Mike and Jasper's links to their LinkedIn, etc., so that you can follow up with them. So just before we go, we've got 2 minutes to go. I just want to introduce that the next session will be on the 10th of July. So that's slightly out of our regular pattern. And this is a selected winners showcase from the International E-Assessment Awards, which are coming up, I think, on the 11th of June. But this session will be focused on a selection of the people that have won awards, and they'll be giving short presentations, and there'll be a panel style discussion and opportunity to ask them. So if you are not able to get along to the assessment conference that's happening in London at that time, this would be a great opportunity for people to catch up, particularly those of us who are on the other side of the world. So thank you again. We will bring the session to a conclusion here. Thank you very much for joining us, folks. Hopefully we'll see you all again in July, provided my interstate shifting business goes all to plan. Thank you very much. Arrivederci. Bye-bye. Let's stop.